Well, good evening and welcome to the latest episode of Homegrown here at LTV. My name is Harry Wareing from 92.9 and 96.9 EHM, and it's a pleasure to be doing this because each week we get a chance to sit down with some amazing talent from Long Island and get to know them a little bit more than just what's coming up with a new record, or we want to know where they're from and kind of learn their story. And tonight I want to welcome to the studio Jeff Allegue. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Harry?
Very good. Thank you for coming in, Jeff. This is kind of cool. We met, I think, briefly years back. You were with New Life Crisis at the time.
Yes.
And you guys are terrific. And there's a quote that I heard from you in an interview that said, success as a musician is that you're playing music every day. And to me, you're incredibly successful. Beyond that, you're not just playing every day. You've done a lot of different things over the years. And I kind of want to dive into your story a bit and get to know you, because it's kind of interesting to see.
I'd like to know.
Well,
I'm curious.
Well, it's interesting because now your son is kind of your age when things started to happen for you, and it's kind of come full circle a little bit.
25. Yeah, it's unbelievable. I mean, it all started in a 5,000 watt studio in Fresno, California, just a boy in a dream.
Well, all right, let's go back to where are you from on the island?
I was born in Amityville, New York, and that's where I started playing guitar. Yeah. And we moved out here with my family in 1972 to Bayport, which I'm still to this day live there. It's a great town. It's a hamlet. It's a little hamlet.
It's beautiful there, and you really are a Long Islander through and through. And you've done a lot of different things, but the best part is you've done a lot here on the island as well. And you're always. We got another project in the works, and you got a lot of solo stuff. And let's go back to, I guess, so you're originally from Bayport and Amityville area. When did you first pick up the guitar?
Probably around, I started interest in it when my dad worked as an art executive at a place called Doyle, Dane and Bernbach in New York during the late 50s into the 60s, real Mad Men stuff. And he was a really talented artist. And he was working on some logos for a new tape machine that was sort of like a miniature 8-track called Play Tapes. And he brought some home for us. Yeah. I have 3 other brothers, and it was sort of like an early Christmas thing, And in this tape thing, there was a bunch of demos, and one of the tapes was the Beatles' Revolver record. And we put that in and we just lost our minds.
That was the first time you heard the Beatles?
Pretty much, yeah. There was 2 things that stick in my mind. The other one was helping my older brother, Joe, cutting this girl's lawn when I was probably like 9, 8, or maybe 8 years old, and hearing this magical mystery tour.
Yeah.
She was playing. It was a summertime, and you could hear it sort of drifting into the yard. And I just thought it was magical music. I still do. Every time I hear that, I always thought of the girl. She was this cute little girl. And I always thought of her when I heard the music, and that was always the thing. And I remember running into them with my mom. I was at Macy's, and holding my mom's hand and walking around, and I saw her with her mother. And that's all I could think of was, day after day alone. Right? That stuff just really stuck with me. And so like everybody my age that became a musician, the Beatles, you can't, it's just undeniable. The impact that they had in such a positive way on so many fronts. I could talk Beatles for hours.
Were your parents musicians, or?
They were not. My dad, as I said, was an artist.
Yeah.
And my mom, she played a bit of piano and stuff, but she wasn't like a professional. But later on, my mom was a kind of a big personality. Yeah. Later on, she ended up running a gourmet gift shop in Sayville called the Country Mouse. She had that for years. And then it was called My Favorite Things. And it was, she used to do cooking classes and stuff. And it was a really cool, but she was the kind of person you'd want to hang out with and talk to for hours. And she was a great cook. But it was a good family to hang out in. My parents were really cool. My house was the house everyone went to talk and listen to, great discussions about films and books and music. And what was cool about my parents was that they listened to us as kids and friends. They didn't just talk over us or dismiss us, Yeah. So we would always play music at my house. It was the destination, which was great. Yeah, I
encouraged.
Yeah, it was. It's a big deal. You don't realize it until you're older. You look back and you go, how lucky you are to have grown up in that environment. Of sort of this freedom of speech, and music and art and all that great stuff. It was just good. And food. It was great food, great wine all the time. My mom was just really cool with that. And so we lived well, even though we weren't like loaded.
Yeah.
We lived well.
When did you get your first guitar? How old were you?
Probably around 8 years old. Sort of a little crummy little Sears thing, nylon string, I think.
as soon as you had one, you knew what you wanted to do, essentially?
I just loved it. I was
Yeah.
drawn to it. I was drawn to the sound of it. I loved the way it looked. I think it made, everyone looks better with a guitar, no matter what. You could be the ugliest guy in the world, but if you got a guitar, you look good. So I thought that was a cool thing. And because of the Beatles and the way their persona was, which obviously at the time, it wasn't like you saw them all the time. You knew it from the pictures on the record albums. It wasn't like videos existed and stuff. So, which was better in a way because your imagination would take over more, But the music is just so damn good, and the personalities that they put across, the sense of fun that they always had. You wanted to be in that world, and you still do. If you watch A Hard Day's Night to this day, you want to be in Beatle world. It was just a better world. And so that happened. And then there was a girl that was a year older than me. She was probably like 10. I saw her play yesterday, but she played it sort of finger picking without, sort of a chord melody, not singing it. And I was fascinated by that. And the other thing that happened at the same time was I saw this guitar player on PBS. I was watching TV with my dad, and he was doing, see if I'll play a little bit of it.
Oh, great.
This pretty extraordinary thing to me because it sounded like two great things happening at once. And he was playing a classical guitar, which is a nylon string guitar, not steel like this. But the thing was, like, you heard this really fast going, and then on the thumb was doing this sort of two things happening, but then he put it together where they had this.
So really, from such an early age, you saw kind of different styles too, in the classical guitar. You really threw yourself into it.
Right. So that piece is a piece called Recuerdos de Alhambra, which is written by a Spanish composer named Francisco Tárrega. But the guy I saw playing it on TV that night was Chet Atkins, it turned out. And Chet Atkins is not normally known to play like a classical piece. He's more of those kind of that kind of stuff.
Well, it's interesting because I know you really were drawn to the classical guitar, and in a way, like different sides of rock and roll and classical music.
Yes, the two things sort of coexisted for me. So after seeing that, my dad had said to me, that's the best guitar player in the world, him and Andrea Segovia. And he brought home a Segovia record and a Chet Atkins record, and then I was just submerged in that. So going back to that girl that I saw play yesterday, it turned out her teacher lived across the street from me in Amityville, this guy named Craig Smith, great guy, and a really like intensely detailed kind of a teacher. So I started taking classical guitar lessons with him at 10 years old. And that's, the training of classical guitar is what gives you all of that independence in your fingers, like even simple, arpeggios. which you can't really do easily with a pick, you know,
Yeah.
or this sort of, you know, like I was doing before, these kind of like. You know, little things like that, which are nearly impossible to do any other way. But
Yeah.
there was a lot of music that I could start playing because of that technique, you know.
That's interesting. So you really threw yourself into it at such an early age. Were you
Yes.
in any bands? Did you join up with?
I did, yeah.
As a teenager?
Yep. When we moved out to Bayport, I started playing in 7th grade. I picked up bass.
Okay, yeah.
Classical guitar also gives you the technique to play bass fairly easily because you're sort of using, you know, this independent thing with the fingers alternating and all that. So I was in all these cool little bands throughout high school, which again was great because you were being noticed, you know. Girls that would never talk to you in a million years, all of a sudden, you were great, you know, if you played a dance and then you were in homeroom the following Monday. And, you know, that one girl that was just like, you know, impossibly beautiful, but would never in a million years talk, and I would never talk. All of a sudden, you existed.
Power of the guitar.
The power of the guitar, man. So yeah, that you know.
You really get, yeah, and it sounds like you really, and we were talking a little earlier with the EHM local as far as with your father being, I don't say a perfectionist, but I think
No, he was. He was
in a way you kind of have that personality too, where you even at a young age you really dove into it and wanted to learn it the right way too.
Yeah. Plus, I think because of the way he did things,
Yeah.
I wanted to do well. As you know, if I was playing something, you know, and he'd bring me into the kitchen after dinner and sit down and play, you know, I wanted to impress him,
Yeah.
you know.
No, that makes sense.
And I didn't want to be crummy. I wanted to be good. So, because I knew how he was with his stuff, you know, and that goes a long way. You know, he never cut corners with things. Whatever he did artistically was really, really good. It was always perfect, no matter what. Even, you know, if he built something, if he built a table or he built a little stool, it was perfect, you know. And I love that. I love that. And his father was a great builder who was in the Five Towns area. Built a lot of really beautiful homes. Allegue Builders, I think, still exists. But again, another real perfectionist in art and in structure, architecture, all that sort of stuff. You know?
And you've taken that attitude and really learned,
screwed it up
with the guitar.
I completely messed it.
No, it's amazing to watch you play. Why don't we do a song if you'd like to do? I know you've got some original stuff and some things that you want to play tonight.
Well, since we're talking Beatles, this is a song called "The Elephant Zoo," which I wrote for hopefully a record that'll come out soon. There was a group I had with my brother John called the Tall Boys for years, and we cranked out a lot of songs.
Nice.
You know, we come from both of us love Beatles, but we also love Squeeze, Elvis Costello, Joe Jackson, those guys, which I think were the best writers post-Beatles, you know. I still think so. Just great, great stuff. So this is a song called "The Elephant Zoo," which is...
He's around but never seen. He can take you places you've never been. He's a liar, a fake, a two-bit punk. There's a lot of ways he can steal your junk. In the long run, there's not much to do, and he'll probably stick it to you. She believes there's nothing wrong as she clears her throat to sing her song. She is so misled and out of touch. There's a lot of ways she can use her crutch. In the long run, there's not much to do, and she'll probably stick it to you. In the summer, they turn on the big lights, and the animals leave 2 by 2. There's a lot to forget to remember, lying here in the elephant zoo. But in the long run, there's not much to do, and they'll probably stick it to you. We can laugh and criticize, but the way it ends up is no surprise. We just take for granted the things we stole, and we get to shovel a deeper hole. In the long run, there's not much to do, and they'll probably stick it to you. In the summer, they turn on the big lights, and the animals leave 2 by 2. There's a lot to forget to remember, lying here in the elephant zoo. And in the summer they turn on the big lights, and the animals leave 2 by 2. There's a lot to forget to remember, lying here in the elephant zoo. Lying here in the elephant zoo.
Very nice. Jeff Allegue here on Homegrown from Bayport via Amityville, and doing a great job. That's a new one that, are we going to hear that soon with a new release, or are you kind of putting it all together?
Who the hell knows?
And see what happens. It's interesting how music is released now. It's just different from when it was, and you can kind of do your own thing. And with everything going on in the world right now, it's
totally,
the rules are gone.
Yeah, things have... The music industry is, has just completely collapsed over the last 10 years, and it's sad, us songwriters and musicians that make a living doing it, you have to just sort of adapt, and you gotta, go out and play and just do what you got to do. But it's not what it was, that's for sure.
Well, I'm curious, and I know we'll get into Trans-Siberian Orchestra and your involvement with that, but I'm curious, when did you meet Paul O'Neill? I believe you were your friends since childhood, right?
Yeah, Paul and I grew up together. I met Paul. I was hired as a guitar teacher in Patchogue. There was a little music school above what is now Family Melody Center. It used to be called Patchogue Music Center. And I had a great teacher in high school who was like, he was a younger guy, but he was the band teacher. And he was like, I'm going to try to get you a job teaching. And I was just like, but I was literally 14. So he said I was 16, brought me up to this place, and I met the lady who ran the place. And that day, Paul O'Neill was being hired as well as a guitar teacher, and he was 18.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I met him. And we became, friends immediately. It was the first day I met him, actually. It was hysterical. We were in this little waiting room, and he was sitting there. He was a very intense guy, and he looked like Jesus. He had this whole Jesus thing going on. And he had his Martin guitar, I remember, and he played American Pie in its entirety, and it's got like 400 verses. So I'm literally sitting there, like, patiently waiting, like, for the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost part, because you're getting close to the end, And I thought, this guy's crazy, he's doing the entire song. I don't know him, and he was very earnest,
Yeah.
But we became good friends, and he started to write songs when, I don't know, maybe a year after that, and we started writing together, or trying to. We didn't really know what we were doing, but he was a very sort of he had a lot of, like, talk about a dreamer, but a guy that would get stuff done somehow, even though we had nothing.
Well, I was curious, did you have an inkling of what was to
no
come, so
way.
to speak?
Well, I'll tell you, it's a good story. So Paul and I ended up playing in a lot of musical theater together. We did stuff at Gateway, actually. He played guitar, I played bass, but we did, like, the Robert Bridegroom, Pippin, Oklahoma, I think, Rocky Horror Show. We did a lot of stuff for maybe a year or so. But then he went in and auditioned. He looked a lot like George Harrison of a certain era, and he auditioned for Beatlemania, which was a Broadway show, sort of the first of the tribute type things. And he got the gig as the understudy to George Harrison. So what I ended up doing with him was helping him learn all these Beatles songs, because I was like a Beatle freak. So I sat with him for hours, and we tried to figure out the parts and all this stuff. So long story short, he never played the part in the show, but he became involved with the company that produced the show. Was a company called Lieber Krebs.
Okay. David
Krebs and a guy named Steve Lieber were the biggest rock management company in the world. They managed Aerosmith, AC/DC, Def Leppard, Ted Nugent, on and on and on. Michael Bolton at some point. So Paul ended up working his way into the sort of the business end of it through Lieber Krebs. but we were still writing songs, and he got a little apartment in New York on 90th Street, great little railroad flat on 3rd Avenue, and said, come on in, we're going to start a band and finish up what we were doing. And we did. We all kind of went in, myself, my other friend Paul, great guitar player, Paul Silverstein, who I worked with for years. We all went in, and we sort of the blind faith part of it, just let's do it,
How old were you at the time?
19.
Oh, wow, okay.
18, 19. So it was a big deal just doing all that. But Paul there was rehearsal studios in New York at the time. They just literally closed, sadly, but called SIR, Studio Instrument Rentals, the biggest rehearsal studios in the world. Every famous band in the world would go to SIR. And we had a great deal there. We were there every single week. We rehearsed there all the time. We ended up hooking up with Joan Jett's management company called Jeff Allegue, because they were also part of Lieber Krebs, and we ended up getting signed to Jeff Allegue. And I watched Joan, her success go from literally unknown to this giant, unbelievable thing. In fact, I'm actually in the I Love Rock and Roll video. It starts off with me walking across the street with this girl, and then Joan comes in. And
that's great.
And it was shot at a club that Lieber Krebs owned called Privates, which was over on 85th and Lex. So I was around a lot of great stuff. Yeah. I ended up later on writing tunes with Joan Jett as well, which was amazing.
What was it like to see that meteoric rise for her?
Unbelievable, because, us being kids and into prog rock, we were all into like Yes and Genesis and all that stuff. We thought her stuff was crap. We just thought it was awful. Like what the hell is this? And, I liked them and all that, but it wasn't until I saw her live that my 18, 19-year-old self got it.
Yeah.
That it was just really cool, straight up rock and roll. It was almost like aggressive doo-wop, I used to call it, because I think the guy that manages her to this day, a guy named Kenny Laguna, was really into or worked with Tommy James and the Shondells, and he was part of that whole crew of writing. So they had that sort of sensibility along with punk, because you got to remember punk was happening at the same time. So you had groups like the Pistols and the Clash and all these bands, and she had been in the band called the Runaways, which was an all-girl band, the first all-girl band. But when that folded, she was in on her own trying to get a deal. So I watched that happen, and I watched how they were rejected by every label. And I think Kenny finally cut a deal with a guy named Neil Bogart, who ran a label called Casablanca out in California, which was really a disco label. I think they had Donna Summer. Oh. But he cut a great distribution deal. So he started his own record label, Blackheart Records, and they released I Love Rock and Roll through this distribution, and it went right up to #1. And it was extraordinary, because I remember seeing her playing like these little clubs in New York and nothing happening. But then all of a sudden the buzz, you could start to feel this buzz, And there was one gig I think she did at this club, Privates, that I was mentioning before. Yeah. And it was just packed to the gills, and it was great. Like, she was great, She's to this day, I call her a great one-trick pony. Like, what she does really well. And it was a cool little band. I'm still friends with some of the guys in the original band. It was just a great rock and roll band, So I think what I learned from that was like, take a step back. Don't think you know everything. Look at other things, because we were all heady thinking, we're...
Well, I was curious because you were watching that happen in front of you, and you're thinking, all right, where do I want to go?
Well, it's not that where we wanted to go. We knew where we wanted to go. That was just happening. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that was like the thing that influenced us.
No, but at the same time, you were also thinking, all right, how do we go? How do we get what we want?
Because we were, like I said, our group, which was a band called Slow Burn, was a very progressive theatrical band. It was Paul O'Neill. It was really the beginnings of Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Slow Burn was a really cool band. It was a very, if you were into early Genesis and then the group Yes, a bit of Queen, Meatloaf, The Who. We loved the Quadrophenia record. I got Paul into Quadrophenia. I loved that record. Still one of my favorite records of all time. And Paul wrote a lot of things back then that ended up years later being used in TSO. Even our production as an unsigned band was gigantic. We had this ridiculous amount of stuff, and I don't know how the hell he was able to swing it all and how we got it. I mean, we really had an amazing production going out, and we weren't signed. So I saw his ambition was gigantic, always was.
Yeah.
But what happened was, so the Slow Burn, we were in Electric Lady recording, which was Jimi Hendrix's studio. We were recording there. We were also recording at the record plant. And we did some stuff at the Hit Factory. These are all major studios in New York. So we had an amazing sounding demo going on. And we had booked the Ritz, the old Ritz in New York, was for our showcase. And at the time, Joan was #1. So as a favor to us, her manager got every single head of every label down to the Ritz that night. That was the favor to pay back Paul for all the work. He worked this record for Joan. You know, he did a lot of work for her. So he was able to actually pull off getting all these major label heads down there. And it was a big deal. This is 1983. And I remember someone saying, boy, if they dropped a bomb on the Ritz tonight, they would literally wipe out the music industry. It was that heavy, you know. And Joan introduced the band. Wow. It was a big deal. But our tape wasn't done yet. So no one that was there heard any of the music until they were there that night, which is not a good thing. Yeah. So they're walking in cold. It wasn't like pop music that was easily digestible. This was like, you know, intense prog kind of stuff. So we didn't get signed, which really put Paul into a bit of a depression. He was kind of like, he retreated and got really heavily into business from that point on. And he went into, and he produced 2 Aerosmith live records, which sort of put him on the map as a producer. And then moved on with a good friend of mine, Steve Hobble, ended up working in Japan promoting a lot of shows with Sting and Madonna. He did the majority of their shows as a promoter there. So he made a lot of dough doing that and a lot of contacts and got a great deal producing a band called Savatage on Atlantic Records. And Savatage became sort of his baby with what turned into Trans-Siberian Orchestra. You know, with a lot of the songwriting and things that we had already sort of planted the seeds with, you know.
At the time, now after that night where things didn't go as planned, so to speak, where did you want to go with your music?
Well, I ended up going with there was the other guitar player in the band, Paul. We were writing as well together, and because O'Neill kind of went off to business, we went off and sort of did another band with a girl singer, this girl named Kari Page, who was amazing. She kind of looked like Debbie Harry with black hair, and she was just a real powerhouse singer. And the drummer, Mike Ratty, was from Slow Burn, also came along with this new band. So we kind of went off in our direction like that. But then I was starting to write my own songs, too. So there was a couple of things happening. And, of course, all this happened in a short amount of time. What seems like decades was like in the span of like 4 years, you know. So when I was 24, I submitted a demo of my bass playing to Guitar Player magazine, which is the biggest magazine publication for it. And I ended up getting profiled, and the guy loved it. This guy wrote had a thing called Profile. And, you know, it was a major, major deal to get into Guitar Player. So I was profiled in Guitar Player, and I started getting a lot of attention from different people. And this is, again, before the internet and all that. And so to get contacted by anyone was like impossible. But I did. I got contacted by Billy Idol's manager wanting to know if I would audition as a bass player for, which of course, But I was, you know, I had never done anything on, and at this point, Idol was gigantic, you know. But because of the notoriety I got from Guitar Player, they saw it and contacted me. So it went on maybe a year or 2 years. Billy was in a motorcycle accident, so he was sort of out of it for a bit. But the audition did happen. I ended up going and playing with Billy Idol, and it was insane. I was nervous as hell, but he liked me, and we played for about an hour. And I had, before going into the audition, I watched like all these bass players go in and out like in literally minutes, and I'm thinking, oh crap, this is, you know, I'm so done, you know. And then you start getting really nervous. Yeah. But I was prepared, and I got to play with them, and it was amazing. I loved it. You know, he was funny as hell, and Steve Stevens, the guitar player, is amazing. So I got to do that, but I didn't get the gig. And as I found out years later, it was because I was too tall. They're kind of short, you know, Idol and Stevens. And
it's funny how that is why you didn't get the gig. Nothing to do with your guitar playing.
No, my bass playing was fine. I was cool with it. And like I said, I stayed in there for an hour. They liked it. It sounded good, but it just looked, you know, there was a stadium tour, so it had to be this sort of uniform thing. Plus, honestly, I was a kid. If I couldn't have done it. As my friend who got me the gig, she was in management, my friend Stephanie, told me years later, she goes, I'm glad you didn't get it because you probably would have died. because it was too nuts. They were too out of control, and it was too big. They were the biggest thing on MTV. They were the biggest thing, they were selling out stadiums at this point. So it was pretty heady,
What was it like? I mean, obviously the profile in the magazine certainly upped your profile, literally. But at the same time, you wanted to do music as a career. Were there moments where you weren't sure if that was going to be possible?
No,
you just
never.
got to keep moving,
Never thought of that. I still don't. To me, it was like, if you have no choice about something and you love it, you just got to.
So there was no backup.
Nah.
It was all.
I've always been teaching guitar and bass and singing and songwriting forever.
It's kind of amazing. You said you were 14 when you started teaching.
Yeah. Yep. Started at 14. Yep. And I have to this day. I've been teaching, consistently, and that's always been and I enjoy teaching quite a lot. But I don't think when you go into arts, backup plans are pointless. You're either in it or you're not. And it's a shit business. You're not going to become rich doing it unless you totally luck out. Today, now, forget it. So you got to love it. You have to love playing music, and you have to love wanting to be around people that are creative. And that's to me why it's great, because it's never boring. It's frustrating, but it's not boring. You're always meeting people like yourself, different people that are, cool and interesting that you normally wouldn't have met if you were in just a regular cubicle job somewhere or whatever.
No day is the same, I'd imagine. For
no,
you.
And that's the best part about it. I think, I've met so many amazing people in my life and so many great, talented folks that, that you just, it wouldn't have happened otherwise. So.
I'm curious, you were in a band with your brother.
Yeah.
Too, the Tall
My brother
Boys
John,
you mentioned. If I'm not mistaken, you guys were on Star Search.
We were.
In the early 90s. How did that come about?
That was awesome.
Because it's interesting now, I think we are spoiled. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if it's a good thing, but you can literally go on YouTube and find a million artists. Back then, there was there was none of that. So this clearly was a great opportunity for you.
Well, it was the American Idol of the day, right? It was a big deal. We were playing in the city. We had a band called the Tall Boys. My brother John and I writing a lot of these songs that I'm even doing today. And we were playing at a club called Woody's, which was owned by Ron Wood from the Stones. He had a club briefly in New York. He's a painter, Ron Wood. So he had an art gallery and he had this little rock and roll club. And we were fortunate enough to get in there. Actually, we played a lot of shows with an up-and-coming band at the time called Blues Traveler, but they weren't big yet. But we were lucky to be around opening for them because their crowds were insane, even when they were starting. So we were in front of a lot of people. And I think because of that, it attracted industry people. So we ended up being seen by a guy named Bruce Gilmer, who at the time worked for MTV. And he loved the band. He thought we were great. And he's like, oh, man, he goes, I got to get you hooked up with the Star Search guys. That would really, up things for you. And he ended up sending out some agents from Star Search that saw us play, and they liked it. And they said, come on down and audition, which we did. But it was one of those cattle calls at SIR in New York. And it was like, the lines and the whole craziness. So you don't think you're going to get on.
Yeah.
But we did good. We went in, we played, they filmed it, and we played like 3 songs or something. And I got a call like a week later. You guys are going to be on, you're coming out to California, all this stuff. So it was like, wow, huge. And we timed it just by accident where we were at the end of the season. So we ended up in the finals just because of where we placed, I mean, the voting thing was kind of a joke. It was apples and oranges because, like the first band that lost to us were really a great band, but they were like a Latin band. It was just different.
Just the time.
Yeah, it was had nothing to do with, I don't think, So, but we ended up winning a bunch of shows and placing in the finals. So it's like, what the, literally going, wow, we actually won. Then you're on again. You're playing again. So again, upped our profile hugely. I mean, it was seen all over the place. And I was celebrity deli man for a week. Guys, hey, weren't you on TV last week? That coffee's on me. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah,
celebrity deli man.
You've made it.
Absolutely. So, that was good, and an independent label called Robber Baron Records saw us and signed us because of that. And we put out an independent record called Normal All Around Men, Tall Boys. And it was, it went into the college charts. It did really, really well. And we toured a little bit in local things. Nothing major happened from it because there wasn't a lot of money behind the label, but it was good. It was a good, we ended up, it was a good record. It was a really good record. It was produced really well by myself and my friend Jim Murphy, great guy. And, we really were into writing a lot, and just, I love that period though, because, all of this, the phones and internet is just giant distractions. Back then you didn't, you weren't as distracted. You know what I mean?
I'm curious. It sounds like you were performing a lot. You were doing a lot of different projects. When did you find the time to write? Was there a set time where you would sit down and kind of shut it all out?
Well, we all got our little 4-tracks. At the time, they had the little cassette 4-track things, which was like the big deal, where you could actually track stuff. So I had one in my little room and just go in there and my drum machine and make up stuff. And my brother John had something similar, and we would work together a lot. He's great. He's a great piano player, great singer, and a very, very talented songwriter. So at the time, we were really sort of focused on, writing sort of in the classic songwriting sense, like the Beatles did, or Elvis. We love Elvis Costello, Joe Jackson. So I think, actually, there's a tune I'll play for you.
Let's do one right now.
Very Elvis-y. But yeah, this is a good example of like why we were so into this stuff. But kind of a song I loved. I wrote this with that in mind, I would say, But anyway, we had this almost like we'd get together, we'd meet, he'd have an idea, I'd have it, then we'd throw it. But because we came from the same place, he's younger than me.
Okay.
So I influenced him quite a lot with the Beatles and all that stuff. But then him as a piano player, because he, didn't play guitar, was great, because how you play piano and what you think of it. And he's an amazing piano player and a great left-hand bass player, which is awesome, because that's a unique thing he does. It was actually hard to even coexist as a bass player with him, because he was so complete all the time. Wow. But we would sit and, just whenever we could write. He lived close by at the time. Now he lives in Florida, but at the time he was close, and we used to just get together and crank stuff out, and it was good.
Very nice. We're with Jeff Allegue here on Homegrown, and I guess if you want to do a song right now, I'd love to hear where this one came from, so to speak. Is this the one you wrote with your brother?
No, this I wrote by myself.
Okay.
This is called My Kind of Girl.
She falls on the kitchen floor, still junk from the night before. She's got on her combat boots and screams. She says that she loves all the boys who want to take her away. She's got everything she needs. Her hair is a tangled mess of dreadlocks and curls. Her face has the rosiest of cheeks. She can't stand her mom or her pop. She's got the worst attitude. She cries at the stupidest things. She's my kind of girl. She's my kind of girl. You can't take your sleeping beauties, but I'll extract the pearl. She's my kind of girl. She fakes all her fantasies, she sings out of key. She breaks all her promises and lies. She hasn't a clue as to why I love her so very much. I wish she could see it in me. She's my kind of girl. She's my kind of girl. You can't take your sleeping beauties, but I'll extract the pearl. She's my kind of girl. I know that she's spoken for, but I can't get her out of my mind. She's all I've been hoping for. What the hell am I wasting my time? She's out of this world. She's my kind of girl. Hey, hey, hey. She's my kind of girl. She's my kind of girl. You can take your sleeping beauties, but I'll extract the pearl. She's my kind of girl. She's my kind of girl. She's my kind of girl. You can take your boring beauty queens, just wanna whirl. She's my kind of girl.
Very nice. Jeff, thanks for doing Homegrown tonight. This is great.
Yeah.
Chance to kind of get to know you a bit and kind of trace all how we got here today. And I'm curious. So we talked about the Tall Boys and Star Search. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the early '90s, and grunge was kind of taking over. So it was an interesting time.
Actually, we were on the charts when Nirvana's Nevermind came out. So we were literally, there was a brief moment where the Tall Boys record was four bits above.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, well,
yes.
But then, that was over quickly.
And then it changed. But such a great experience. From there, if I'm not mistaken, you went out and decided to tour with Taylor Dane.
Well,
how did that come? You were doing a lot of different projects.
I ended up auditioning again. She's a Long Island girl.
Yeah.
And she was really, really famous through the late 80s into the early 90s. And I knew some of the people involved with her. I knew this guy, my friend, the late Joe Linnane, worked for her as her tour manager. And later on ended up managing her. But he was great because he got me to audition. Now, of course, I had to be good. It wasn't like he got me the gig. But I did go down and, I auditioned. And it was one of these things where I go home and I get a call. All right, you're in. Yeah, great. All right, we're gonna send you. We're gonna send you these videotapes. You're gonna have to learn these dance moves. Blah blah blah. You're gonna be next week. You're gonna be on a plane. You're gonna be out. I'm like, what? Like the whole thing. Now, it flipped me out because I first of all didn't think I was gonna get it. Secondly, I didn't think it was gonna be that fast. Where I had to learn all this stuff, this whole show with choreography, a little bit of movements and stuff, and
probably different from what you're used to. I mean,
and I was playing bass, right?
It's not prog rock.
No, it was great though. Let me tell you something. It was one of the greatest bands I've ever played with. So yeah, I get the thing. I basically stayed up for a week, learned this entire show. The next thing I know, I'm flying out to it was a place called Henderson, which is like the border of like Mexico and Texas. Wow. It was hot as hell. There was probably like 4,000 people at this gig. We were playing with the Village People. So here I am, nervous as hell, sitting there backstage, like between like the Indian guy and like the cop.
Well, you mentioned it earlier. No day is the same, and all of a sudden you show up, and
I'm like, I didn't meet Taylor until she walked out on the stage and gave me a nod. Like it was nuts, totally nuts. Like a week after that, we were doing one of these insane outdoor shows. So I remember pulling with the band in the van behind the stage and looking through the stage and seeing like these lights, but it looked like a mile away over like thousands of people. It was one of these like Central Park things. On that bill was B.B. King, Shaka Khan, Tower of Power, Robert Cray, us. I was flipping out. Like I was so nervous. It was ridiculous. The Jumbotrons, the whole bit. So I was thrust into that, But again, it's like sink or swim stuff. If I screwed up, I would have been canned. That would have been over. But I got through it. There was one night that we were playing, and I had a spot in my head, and she wasn't a particularly good dancer, but we had to do these little choreographed kind of moves. And I'm playing, and I just went like this. I was blinded by the spot, I cracked her so hard in the head with my bass. To where it was, but it was like a bat connecting with the ball perfectly. And I'm like, I'm so done. I'm just waiting for the blood to start pouring off her head. Thank God it didn't. And right after the song, I just went up to the mic in front of everybody and said, I'm so sorry. Otherwise, I think it would have been canned. And she just laughed it off. But I mean, I cracked her so hard. And she deserved it.
Well, I've heard she was difficult, but
she is difficult. But I got to say, she's amazing. She sang great every single freaking night. Never heard her falter. Just an amazing voice and an amazing musician too. She would know if I was using my fingers or a pick. Wow. That's how good she was. She would say, I don't want you to use your fingers on that song. I go, how do you even know that? But she's really great.
Did you enjoy touring? Because it seems like, we want to kind of transfer now and talk a little about TSO.
Yeah.
Because it seems like you were not necessarily, because you didn't go out on tour with TSO, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I didn't tour with TSO, no. I did some shows, big shows with them. Played the Garden with TSO.
Did you enjoy touring, or was it that? Did you have your fill of it?
You did. Well, when I was with Taylor, my son was very young, so it was kind of weird because I didn't want to be away as much as I was. But I mean, it was exciting for a while, sure, because you're always in a great room, suites. We did a lot of Vegas stuff and a lot of casinos, theaters, fairs, all that sort of stuff. We played with a lot of great acts through the years, you know. I mean, that was awesome, you know. But it gets old after about a year, I would say, where you just kind of like, you know, you're never sleeping right, you're never eating right, you're just shot all the time, you know. So that's a drag, you know, quite honestly. And you can see why people start using drugs or drinking or whatever, because you have to be. There was a time I was in Vegas playing, and I was so shot. And I remember I'm playing, I'm going, oh, all of a sudden it was like, whoosh, everything went like into this dream world, and I'm just watching my hand move.
Wow.
I had no idea what I was even holding or what I was completely out of it. And that freaked me out, you know, and all of a sudden like, the adrenaline kicks in and like, oh my God. And I remember that night thinking, oh shit, you know, this is bad, you know, because I didn't sleep. Yeah. And we had to get on a plane and go someplace else right after that.
Yeah.
That part, it's, you know, sucks. It's not fun. The shows, you know, like it's the cliche. The shows were the fun part. Yeah. The hang was always good. I love these guys. You know, it was a really great band of guys. I learned a lot from these guys. They're tremendous musicians and very different from my, you know, where I came from musically. These guys were great with funk and dance grooves, and it was deep. You know, I mean, I learned a lot. And as the bass player, I had to be, you know, funkier, you know, and I learned a lot about funk from these guys.
Had you been in touch with Paul throughout that, I'd imagine? And then when did you decide to,
Paul,
when did you kind of help him out a little bit?
So I did a lot of the demos for TSO early on. Paul would call me up out of the nowhere. Now, I didn't know what he was even talking about.
Well, I was curious what your first reaction was.
I'll tell you exactly. This is the perfect thing. It would be as if someone said to you, you know, I want you to give me all your money. I got this great idea. It's going to be huge. It's called the Mutant Ninja Turtles. Give me like $100,000 and you'd go, what are you, crazy? That's what this was. It was like I had no idea what he was talking about. Didn't matter though. Like, you know, we did demos together. It was like playing. I did one of the first things was but it was like this piece, a Bach piece, the famous Jesu Joy of Man's Desiring. Except through a Marshall with these, you know, massive sound. It's insane, you know. So it basically ruined a great piece. So that was the first thing I played for him. And then we ended up going back after me doing all this craziness to just the acoustic guitar and the version like what I just played for you now. You know, but Paul had a vision. Paul was one of those guys. Paul was the 10th grader pumping his fist. That's what Paul was. And really truly believed in that, you know. And it's amazing. Like so I was with Taylor Dane. I had done a bunch of demos before that. He called me up one day and he says, you know, we're playing at the Beacon Theater. I said, what do you mean we're playing? What's So he said, this thing I started. I said, oh, all right, cool. So, you know, gave me passes to come. And I'm standing there online and like, it's like packed and it's sold out. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Like, it was amazing. I'm like, what is this, you know? And actually, the girl, Jennifer Cello, who sings in the band I'm in now, Cover Girl, she was there that night singing. She had just started with Trans-Siberian. She was one of the main voices in Trans-Siberian. Incredible talent. Paul loved her too, as we all did. She was just amazing. So that was the first night that I saw, oh wow, something's going on here.
This has legs.
Yeah, and so we talked a lot because Paul and I were really tight as far as we spoke a lot on the phone when whatever was going on, even during the gigantic success of this thing. I think I was the only person that wasn't really sort of on the payroll, you know, saying, yeah. You know, so we could talk quite honestly to each other about, you know, whatever was going on. It's somewhat normal because his life certainly wasn't normal when it blew up. It became crazy. So at the end of the Taylor Dane thing, you know, I could see TSO was taking off, and they started doing 2 touring companies, an East and a West Coast tour, which they've done to this day. So it's 2 full-blown productions. So they basically get a year's worth of touring within 2 months. You know, one starts on the west, one starts in the east, and they sort of go around and converge in the middle somewhere. And we talked about having a group that sort of was, you know, rehearsing while they were on tour, that in case anyone got sick, that someone could go out in a moment's notice, you know.
The taxi squad, so to speak.
Yeah,
Yes.
which I started doing, you know, and it was great. And I, again, met some amazing musicians through the years with that as well, you know. And that was a real insurance policy for the group, you know, because it was always, we know, everyone's going out of flu season.
No, that makes sense.
You know? Yeah. And, but like I said, he let me, I played some major shows, and it was really to his, you know, I mean, they had a great band that was already touring, but he let me come out and play in the Garden in 2004, which was unbelievable. That was an insane experience. And Nassau Coliseum, I got to play, and a couple other theaters before that, before it became the stadium thing. So yeah, I mean, and play on the records, which was amazing. So these are multi-platinum selling records that I've been on. And that again is, you know, who the hell would have thought that would have ever happened? It's incredible. You know, it really is incredible.
It's nice to talk to you because it feels like you're always doing different things. You're always looking for that next project. And I know you have a new band right now, CoverGirl.
Yep.
How did that come about?
CoverGirl was, when I was with New Life Crisis, we had a drummer for a while. The first drummer we had is, I just actually talked to him, Steve O'Brien, a great guy, great drummer. But when he left, this other guy named John Sawicki came in. And John Sawicki, real character, he had been one of the stars of that show Stomp on Broadway he was with it for 17 years, and he was the touring thing of that. So he toured around the world for a long time doing that. But when that ended for him, he started going back to playing drum set. So I played with him a bit in New Life Crisis with Paul Mahaas and him and my friend Rob Weber, who's a keyboard guy. So when we were done with New Life Crisis, and I had played with Paul for probably 18 years off and on, you know, quite a long relationship with that. And, you know, it's kind of looking for something else to do. And it turns out that John, the drummer from Stomp, Sawicki, was great friends with that girl, Jennifer Cella. They had played in a band together when they were younger. It was just weird, what? So he's like, yeah, let's try something, you know. It was one of those things. And we brought in a guy named Ken Chino. Ken Chino is a great guitar player who plays with Mike Del Giudice for years, a Big Shot thing. Yeah. And he came aboard. Rob Weber initially was the keyboard guy, but he's not in it at the moment. We're down to like a 4-piece. But it was just a weird coincidence. It was like, how do you know? You know her, and I know, you know. So we started this thing, and it's been about 2 years now. You know, sort of, you know, we were just building all this momentum, and then the whole COVID thing hit, so we had to like reinvent what we're doing now. You know.
What's interesting too, and we do have to wrap up, unfortunately, but it has to be.
Has it been an hour already?
We're almost there. Yeah,
we could do hours, Harry.
We could, but there'll be a part 2. I have a feeling.
All right.
I'm curious about your son because he grew up in obviously a musical household, and it sounds like you were not. It's great that you honestly came home, but you really were there.
Yeah.
As he was growing up.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's
doing a lot of
important to me
different
that, you know.
Yeah, that really has shown it. And when
he's a
about
good guy, you know, and he's a really talented guy, Grant. He's got.
Did you want him to be a guitar player? How did it come about?
Well, I didn't want anything except I would put stuff out, you know, like the worst thing is when someone says, you got to do this. So I never did that. We used to have like a little drum set. We had a little keyboard. We had a little guitar, everything, you know, miniaturized.
Put everything out there. See where he goes
to. Exactly. That's kind of what we did.
And
he ended up gravitating towards pretty much all of them. He's a great drummer. He plays keyboards great. He sings well. He's a great songwriter. Oh my God, the stuff he's been writing is nuts. In this vein, but even more so. And a great guitar player, you know.
It has to be very cool because I know you guys did a father-son gig, I think, earlier in the year.
We do a lot of those. Yeah, we have through the years done, and he recorded a record with me too.
Oh wow,
that's out now called Silhouette, an instrumental guitar record that you can get on iTunes. A great record. I did a lot of arrangements of different famous songs, you know, Beatles, Beach Boys stuff, but also some AC/DC thing. I did Back in Black on there, some Zeppelin. You know, just cool instrumental arrangements, and Grant played on quite a lot of those things. You know, we have a very diversified kind of style of music. We don't just do one thing, you know.
That's great. And it sounds like you want to consistently try different projects and do different things.
Yes.
Hopefully things will start to open up a little sooner.
It's not bad. Our band CoverGirl has been playing quite a lot, actually, because we stripped it down a bit to just a 4-piece, more acoustic. But I actually quite like it because it's like people have to sit and listen. They can't be just out of their minds, you know. So it's actually in a way cool. You know, it's almost like you're doing like these dinner theater shows, you know. But we've been working all the time. We've been literally playing every week, and we're you know, we'll be doing 2 gigs this week coming up. Great group, you know, and I got to get her on the show on EHM to do, you know.
Well, we look forward to it.
She's amazing.
This
talent.
is great. Well, thank you so much for your time. We have to wrap up Homegrown tonight with Jeff Allegue. Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing what other projects you're involved with, Cover Girl, the band, and everything with your son. Thank you.
Do you want one more tune?
Thank you for doing this. It's Homegrown. We do have to wrap up. Do we have time for one more song, or we'll wrap it up?
Yeah, one more song.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, cool.
Thank you so much, Jeff. You've been great.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Harry. It's great. So this is a song I wrote with my brother John called "Lonely Tonight." You know, I think we were thinking very Everly Brothers with this tune.
She walked me out again tonight. She said she wasn't feeling right. She put her arms around me, just like the way she found me then. It's happening again, 'cause I'm lonely tonight, and I'm feeling the pain begin, 'cause it doesn't seem right. I don't like the mess that we're in. She looked me straight between the eyes. This time she knocked me down new sides. She made me feel like crying. I loved her to the dying end. It's happening again, 'cause I'm lonely tonight, and I'm feeling the pain begin, 'cause it doesn't seem right. I don't like the mess that we're in, 'cause I'm lonely tonight, and I'm feeling the pain begin, 'cause it doesn't seem right. I don't like the mess that we're in, 'cause I'm lonely tonight, and I'm feeling the pain begin, 'cause it doesn't seem right. I don't like the mess that we're in.
Very nice. Jeff Allegue here on Homegrown on LTV as we wrap up. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
We
Harry.
appreciate it. We
Yeah.
look forward to seeing what's next
See you in part 2.
as we continue. And yes, of course, thanks to everyone behind the scenes for putting Homegrown together. We really appreciate it. And it's been a lot of fun, Jeff. Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks. You too.
And thanks for watching LTV's Homegrown.